After a lot of thought and reflection, today I'm going to share with you what is perhaps the ultimate reason why I'm glad that I left the United States, the country of my birth, and perhaps what is the ultimate reason why you as an entrepreneur or an investor should have a second passport and should be diversified. Well over a decade ago, I started traveling all over the world, and it became a majority of the time kind of thing where I spent a lot of my time in countries all over the world learning the stuff and meeting the people that have formed what Nomad Capitalist is today. Back 7 or 8 years ago, I left the United States for good and went back only a handful of days in that time before ultimately expatriating from the country and leaving for good. And there's a lot of talk. We've been interviewed by various news outlets. You see articles everywhere from the New York Times to the BBC. Why are so many Americans giving up their citizenship? Now, in this year of chaos, you see so many Americans who are Googling, where can I move overseas? How do I get out? People are increasingly uneasy in the U.S. and also, I think, in the Western world in general. But what do these magazines, what do these newspapers talk about? They talk about high taxes. They talk about things like FATCA, where Americans have to report their bank accounts worldwide. They talk about all the financial reasons. But what they don't talk about is the reason that I'm going to share with you today. And I think part of that is the fact that in the United States, there are basically two camps today. You are basically in the Make America Great Again camp, and any tiny slight against Donald Trump makes you a communist. On the other side are the communists, the people who want to come and take everything you have. They want to raise your tax rates. People have said 70, 75%. Some of them even want a maximum wage where you can't make more than $1 million a year, or you can't have more than $10 or $100 million in your bank account. Those are the two camps. And if you happen to say, I believe in free markets and lower taxes and welcoming success and respecting people who work hard, but I'd like people to have freedom and I would like to be able to be an independent thinker, there's really not a lot of room for that. I think that's part of the problem. And so what I'm going to tell you today does not fall into either camp. And you'll see people on both sides who are going to criticize for saying that I'm either a capitalist swine, or you'll see people who I am a Bernie-loving commie because I don't go along with Donald Trump on every decision. So here's the thing that really I look back on in all my years being out of the United States and now having closed that door for good. It's peace of mind. The number one thing that I've gained is not that I've saved some money on tax, because there are plenty of strategies for Americans living overseas, as much as people don't want you to think that. Plenty of strategies. If you're an American, you can go overseas. Now, tax rates domestically go up, your tax rates offshore may go up as well. And so the delta may not change, but your rate may go up. But for years, I lived overseas as an American, and I paid practically nothing legally. I filed all the forms, reported all my bank accounts. I was a good little boy. After all, I am the goody two-shoes of the offshore business. So it's not about that. It's not even about the reporting of the regulations, even though it did get really annoying to file every year, the equivalent of a small town phone book, and have to send it in often in paper format because of the complexities of my tax return. And sometimes it would get sent back because I didn't sign it in the right place. But what do all those things really lead to in the end? They lead to not being part of that system, no longer being American, no longer being a U.S. person for tax purposes. It isn't really about the tax purposes. It's about the peace of mind. Now, here's where the current situation comes into play. I'm watching the news and I see news of now Donald Trump saying, we're going to not allow our companies to be doing business with China. We're going to go and we're going to look very strongly at punishing them. And you have a situation where it was first with TikTok, and it was, we don't want the Chinese coming and running this company, and they branded it as spyware, and you can have your own opinions. I haven't followed it that closely because it's not my problem anymore. But it set an interesting precedent that certainly a country like China would retaliate against. Certainly if you did it to other countries, they might retaliate against. And now there's talk of how people say, well, let's just bring everything back from China. Let's close down the supply chain. Let's create more jobs. I'm not really sure how you're going to do that at scale. And keep prices low for people, because people have been accustomed to cheap stuff. As much as people complain about deregulation, they like $59 JetBlue flights, which didn't exist before the airline industry deregulated. So I'm not entirely sure that's going to work, and I'm not an economist here trying to figure this out, but the point why that affects people like myself and perhaps people like you is if you're a U.S. citizen, your president and your country is now basically saying there are going to be penalties for what you do doing business around the world. You cannot leave. And so for me, the biggest reason for me to exit was America first. To me, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Filing tax returns for a country I visited 0 days a year, annoying, ridiculous, insulting, having to turn over all my bank details from countries I actually did live in to a country I don't live in, reviling, quite frankly, but I did it, and I did it properly, and I made sure that we checked all the boxes. But when I heard America First, I said, this is the kind of thing that's going to happen. You're going to have a government that's going to increasingly become empowered to go after not only people overseas. People say, Andrew, you don't understand America First. It's about every country respects itself. Believe me, okay? Believe me. The United States, I mean, they've hardly been laying down. For as much as people, in the Trump administration have talked about how the U.S. was laying down, what happened was other countries around the world decided to develop over the last 30 years in my lifetime. And they decided to become somewhat successful too and stop living in backwaters in some cases, as I think any intelligent person would agree is their right to do. Every country wants to be successful. And I think some people looked at that as, oh, it's terrible, we need to assert our rights. How a country who's going around invading other countries and telling everyone what to do and impacting the global financial system didn't put itself first, to me is a little ridiculous. But America First, I knew, would not be just about doing that. It would not be just about asserting dominance on the rest of the world in other ways. It would be about telling you, the American, that you can't do certain things. Now, they had that for years. They have things like OFAC, which prohibits you from doing business with certain people in certain countries. They have the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which forbids you from going and doing business the way in countries the way that they do business. And so it really imposes this U.S. worldview on people who want to go all over the world. And now that's only going to get greater, in my opinion. And so what happens if you're a U.S. citizen who wants to do business internationally? Are countries going to retaliate the way the U.S. does? And the answer, I think, invariably will be yes, in some way, at some time, and in some fashion. What does that mean? It means your ability to do business globally is going to be less. If you want to leave the country, you're going to have few opportunities. We've seen it with COVID. The U.S. passport has essentially become worthless. You might as well have a passport from Guinea-Bissau at this point. Now, that may be a temporary thing, but I think that you're going to see this year of chaos really reshape the world in ways where you're going to see things flatten out, perhaps just a little bit at first, but it's going to begin a flattening out where you're going to see certain countries that we've talked about, larger countries like a Turkey, for example, or Brazil, become increasingly a little bit more influential in the world as the U.S. loses some power, as more things go to China. And basically, the point is, if you're an American, if you're a European, if you're from a country where your country has been going around evangelizing their worldview and putting it upon people, other countries are going to increasingly have the power to say, we don't want your business, and potentially that impacts your business. Now, certainly, if you want to run a swimming pool cleaning business, that may or may not affect you. It means your products that may cost more. It means you have to raise your customers' prices. That may not be sustainable to a full degree, but it may not impact you as much as someone like my business. But what I can tell you very simply is this. I feel very comfortable now being a citizen of countries that don't particularly care. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that I'm running around the world doing all kinds of crazy stuff, but if I want to go do business in China, if I want to do business with Russia, whatever. I mean, even I know people in countries like Armenia, and they do business with Iran, and it's so normal, right? And coming from the United States, it seems really, weird to me. I remember the first time I met someone from Iran and kind of became their friend a number of years ago. It's like, am I even allowed to be speaking to you? I think that being a citizen of countries that are not judgmental, that don't insist that you do things exclusively their way, that allow you to leave and go out into the world and conduct business, that's increasingly going to be an asset as some of these larger powers get themselves into sticky situations and get you into sticky situations with that. And so what I don't want you to be is to locked out of other markets. We've increasingly seen that over the years with the cryptocurrency markets. We don't want Americans. We don't want people who live in the United States. Don't give us a U.S. address. It's even before cryptocurrency, it was that way for many investments. If you had a foreign company, if you had a foreign domicile or different structures, you could invest in certain things overseas, whereas someone who lived in the United States or had a U.S. company or U.S. bank account couldn't. And so I think, by the way, I've started to see that in some cases with all the regulations in the EU and the EEA in Europe, to where there's certain things that I'm doing where they're double checking now, hey, you're not living in Europe, are you? In the European Union. And so you're increasingly seeing these Western countries which have out-regulated themselves, out-taxed themselves, out-evangelized themselves all over the world, that people are just saying, we don't need you. The bank in Singapore says, we have plenty of money from wealthy people in China. We don't need some guy from the Netherlands coming with 50 grand and bringing his regulations into our world. We're doing just fine here. Thailand is doing well. There's more and more wealthy Vietnamese. We've got a whole little ecosystem here with almost no regulations. We'll do business ethically, of course. We're going to run like a real bank, and some of the strongest banks on earth are in Singapore. But why would we want to deal with Americans? Unless maybe in some cases they're really putting in a lot of money, or a European really putting in a lot of money, but even then we're going to restrict them. And so this is what happens. Fewer options, fewer places to bank, fewer places to invest, fewer places to do business, more rules, more restrictions, more cutting into your profits, your ability to go where you want. These Western countries have the power to control not only your travel, and they've effectively done that this year through their policies, but they have the power to control your money. I increasingly hear from people who are very successful who are worried about things like bank holidays and how that's increasingly being adopted by the West. I hear from people who are concerned that they're going to have less freedom to do business and manage their money the way they want. And so for me, leaving that system behind has given me a great peace of mind that I can still act ethically, I can still act like a normal person, I can still run a normal business, make relatively straightforward investments, but I can do so without having to worry about someone breathing down my neck, not having to worry about what rule or regulation is going to come out next. And that's what I've told people, right? What's the next tax they're going to come out with? Is it going to be a wealth tax? Is it going to be a retroactive wealth tax as they want in California? Is it going to be a higher income tax? Is it going to be who knows what? Whatever you guys come up with, as they say in the Balkans, it is not my problem anymore. And that feels really good. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.